Farmers, native people, Amazon Amerindians, make sure that a. You will thrive in the near future, this by means of carbon-agroforestry, this on your own lands, this by producing apart from food, also all that 8 billion humans need, fuels, energy and all materials, and also, b. You replace and make obsolete all industries that depend on non-renewables. Possibly you or the general public are not aware that a carbon-agroforest produces 100 times more biomass than traditional agriculture, and that all this biomass can be transformed into fuels, energy and all materials. In the case of carbon-agroforests, the fuels are renewables and biofuels, but they are renewables and biofuels that do not compete with food crops. Possibly you or the general public are not aware that the installations that, departing from biomass only, produce all what humans need, are well known, well established for over 100 years, possible to be made locally, and in very modern versions available on the international markets, this from very small, like for one household, to as large as industrial scales. The image on your screen shows you the needed process, this with the input of biomass above in the middle. As you can see, the output is, or can be the same as for the petrochemical industry. As said, in the case of biomass as input, the scale can be from very small, while the installation can be self-made, to industrial scale, and depends only on the demand. In the case of the petrochemical industry, the scale must be immense, most often in petrochemical industry ports, also because the petrochemical industry uses crude oil as input, which is clearly toxic, and consequently complex to handle. As is well known, the petrochemical industry is polluting, and many of its products and waste materials contain persistent and toxic chemicals that pose serious risks to human health and the environment. The case of carbon-agroforests, while you will be doing this by means of carbon-agroforests, all what humans need will be produced and consumed as renewables, and you will be automatically solving all unsolved human challenges, including all climate challenges, as well as making all other humans thrive. How would something unedited like that be even possible? This unedited result can be achieved by uniting farmers, native people, Amazon Amerindians, all those who have access to lands that can be transformed into carbon-agroforests. The Amazon Amerindians of Brazil all by themselves already have full access to at least 117 million hectares, because that is what they officially have on their names and full access to, this while the Amazon Amerindians of Brazil could be expected to have access to all, or most part, of the Amazon forest in Brazil, which is 420 million of hectares. Now directing to the Amazon Amerindians. You Amazon Amerindians are the first ones and ones of the very few that provingly preserve the Amazon forest, and natural vegetation in general, and the only ones that provingly maximized or preserved the carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere, plus climate regulation. While that is where COP30 is or should be about, and while you Amazon Amerindians were promised to have a voice in COP30, in reality you are about the only ones that have no voice, and are once more treated like invaders. Instead of having to sneak closer to the COP30 and taking risks, maybe you would better approach journalists and CEOs directly, and away from COP30, this not only in Belém in Brazil, but across Brazil, the Americas, and the world. This is the ideal or a very good time to do so. Once you make contact, make sure you record all their contacts for later, as well as the links to their channels of communication. Amazon Amerindians deeply impressed journalists. You Amazon Amerindians should meet journalists independent from COP30, and tell them that you can and will solve all what the rest of the world never was able to solve, or even to start solving. This would impress more than telling these journalists that you were not heard in COP30 and that you are the ones that solve climate challenges, but without telling your action plan, or how you would solve climate challenges while making all humans thrive. So before you make claims, ideally you should think about a realistic action plan that you like and fully understand, or perhaps study the carbon-agroforest action plan that is presented in detail in this channel. That is of course if you like and understand the in this channel presented and never before presented carbon-agroforest action plan, that is based on carbon-agroforests, which are based on the practices of your ancestors, and that made them thrive, as no other peoples or cultures ever sustainably thrived. What is presented in this channel is exactly what your ancestors did for many thousands and possibly millions of years, based on ancient knowledge of the Amazon Amerindians that you lost, most probably because of assaults in a deep past, that probably were repeated at the time of the conquests around the year 1500. The action plan that is presented in this channel is an action plan that is the result of a cooperation between Amazon Amerindians and a few non-Amazon Amerindian researchers and consultants, who assisted Amazon Amerindians in the research and development of this action plan. This research and development of this action plan took place in the period between 1984 and the year 2000 in the Amazon forest, and was funded by a series of countries across the world. But the execution of the research and action plan that was done in the Amazon forest was kind of distracted from its application, so today only very few of you are aware it ever was done and developed, and that it was extremely promising in its objectives, which correspond very well with the objective of COP30, and what we 8 billion humans need today as action plan. Some of the non-Amazon Amerindian researchers that assisted the Amazon Amerindians in the development of this action plan in between 1984 and the year 2000 are part of the team that prepared this video, as well as other videos of this channel, and that present the here meant carbon-agroforest action plan. If you are Amazon Amerindian or want to work with the here presented action plan, please let us know your doubts, and we will do our best to answer them as soon as possible. The Amazon Amerindians of Brazil all by themselves already have full access to at least 117 million hectares of for carbon-agroforests suitable lands. Together or united with the other Brazilian Amerindians, non-Brazilian Amazon Amerindians, native peoples, and farmers across the world, they all together could have access to as much as 2 billion hectares of land, and make a deal with a number of CEOs to produce and eventually develop the robots and drones that are necessary to make sure that you will thrive in a near future, by means of carbon-agroforestry, and by replacing and making obsolete all industries, producing all that 8 billion humans need, including food for humans as well as animals, fuel, energy, and all materials, including all being renewable and superior to what the traditional industries still produce. It is clear that the traditional industries are confronted with ever more serious challenges to do what they did for many decades, and this at clear costs, including climate costs. After all, this is where these COP30 and all former events and agreements have to deal with. If you follow the news, it is clear that these former events and agreements never got out of their deadlocks or standstills. Carbon-agroforest action plan with robots and drones. These robots and drones will replace all heavy and soil-compacting agricultural machines, and a fleet of them will only cost a fraction of one fleet of typical agricultural machines, will allow for extreme autonomy, and maintenance and repairs will become insignificant. Further, those that have access to the lands, alone or together with the CEOs, could need to hire or contract operators and also remote assistance of the wide variety of robots or drones. Obviously, this way they would create important and sought-after jobs, many of the jobs existing of the remote controlling and assisting of the robots and drones that are continuously working in the carbon-agroforests. These farmers, native people, Amazon Amerindians, etc., can be from or live in very distinct countries or even continents. CEOs doing that was never done before? Why would these CEOs do something that was never done before, like developing this wide variety of robots and drones? Simply because it will create an unedited and new additional demand, and these CEOs will become involved in the largest industry and business ever, and in fact also simply because this new parent industry and parent business will replace, and in fact make obsolete every former not carbon-agroforest related industry and business. The above parent industry and parent business will parent or host all at the same time. New forms of agriculture, silviculture, as well as industries related to the production of food, fuel, energy, basic materials, metals, rare earth elements, etc. CEOs will grasp in less than 1 minute. In the case of being approached by a group that has access to at least 117 million hectares and possibly 2 billion of hectares of land suitable for the carbon-agroforest, which are able to produce everything that humans need, as well as with a realistic action plan in hand, certain CEOs will grasp or even understand the importance and impact for them in the world, in possibly less than 1 minute. CEOs approached with a unique opportunity. How would CEOs know they are being approached with a unique and unedited opportunity? By a group that has access to such a large amount of land, and with a realistic action plan in hand. Well, that would soon become clear if only a fraction of all farmers, native people, Amazon Amerindians, and activists, would give a like to this video, subscribe to this channel or share this video with others. It is all in your hands. It is all in some clicks. The other way could be approaching journalists, if possible before the end of the COP30. Especially CEOs that have been thinking of terraforming other planets, or those that have emitted prizes to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, could be amongst the first or amongst the most eager to step in. The new parent industry and parent business will create and control the markets of all that 8 billion humans need and consume: food, fuel, energy, and basic materials. How would this new parent industry and parent business be able to find its place on the market and compete? All its resources will be free and infinite, simply because its resource will be the carbon dioxide that is in abundance in the atmosphere and in the oceans, and is obviously for free. No large and expensive machines will be needed, nor used. This parent industry and parent business will not at all or hardly depend on any other industry or service, especially provided that the involved CEOs also deliver the few services this industry and business does need. Further, all roads and logistics that hitherto were destructive for the Amazon forest and its biodiversity, as well as for all other natural vegetation, and for all native people, will in this case of clear and coordinated action and production related to carbon-agroforests, become beneficial instead of destructive. This and other videos on this channel have been translated and or dubbed into more than 5 languages, including the official languages of the 9 Amazonian countries, this to support this initiative and plan to unite the 8 billion inhabitants of the planet around this action plan for carbon-agroforestry, generating important jobs, new business opportunities, and boosting the economy. If you'd also like to support this initiative, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, ask a question, or give a like to this video.